So welcome to this episode of the State of Mirrorless, a series of video interviews with photographers and industry experts about the world of mirrorless cameras. This week, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Valérie Jardin. I hope I got the pronunciation right.
You did.
A photographer, a committed educator, a traveler, an expert podcaster, and if I may say so, a great friend. Valérie has a career in commercial photography, is a frequent guest on This Week in Photo, where she now does her own show about street photography. She's a renowned workshop instructor and a master at the Canon. So what's next for you, being a guest on Ellen's talk show, writing a book?
Well, the book will probably more likely. Hi, Hugo. How are you doing?
Hi, Valérie. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks. Thank you for having me. I know things keep happening, and I'm having fun. So as long as I'm having fun, I'm going to keep doing this, and I don't know what's next.
Yeah. So let's start by talking a bit about your career. I know you have been a commercial photographer for some time, and then you decided to give up, or at least partially give up that career and pursue new aims, new interests?
Yes, and yes, I worked as a commercial photographer for many years, and mostly the last few years doing interior photography, as well as some food photography still, although that was kind of winding down. But I really enjoyed the interior photography, and I was working for residential space, commercial space, and I really enjoyed it until I started teaching. And when I started doing my workshops a few years ago, I discovered that's where my passion was, really to share the passion really with like-minded people and to travel the world teaching. And so now I've actually officially quit shooting commercially this year when I sold all my DSLR gear, and it was the best decision ever. So now it's all about teaching, sharing, speaking, writing, podcasting.
Yeah, that's great. Also, you think this is going to be the next stage in your career?
Yeah, living the dream, really, and who doesn't, wish to do that, as a photographer, to pick a location and say, hey, I'm just going to go teach in Rome or Melbourne and fill a workshop and go out there and spend a week with friends, new friends. So it's awesome.
So before we start talking about gear, I'm sure our listeners are mostly interested in cameras and lenses, but tell us a bit more about your workshops. Well, what kind of workshops do you do? You do street photography. Is that your specialty, right?
Well, that's what I've become known for, although I do teach how to see photographically, and the week-long workshop are more about seeing photographically with a big emphasis on street photography, of course, and then the weekend workshops are more specialized in street photography only, because that's really my passion, and that's what I love to do best. If I only could pick one genre of photography, that would definitely be it. But I've touched every aspect of photography, so I like to share tips and techniques on other things besides streets as well.
Cool. So talking about gear, you said you sold all your DSLR equipment, and what was your choice?
I was a Canon girl for my entire career, and a couple years ago now I switched to Fuji when the X100S came out, and well, not quite 2 years, but a year and a half. And I never ever looked back. The only times I used the Canon gear after that was strictly for commercial shoots. I still had a few clients, but I hate it. I hated taking it out. I hated carrying the big heavy tripods, and so I knew it was time to make the switch. I was teaching exclusively with the Fuji and traveling. I mean, I even went to Iceland just with the X100S. Talk about limiting yourself. But I figured, you know what? That's the limitations make you grow as a photographer. And then I just loved having just this fixed focal length and that camera that nobody noticed, and that's so inconspicuous for street photography, especially. But it works for everything else. That's the thing. I mean, I shot landscape with that camera. I shot, architectural details. It's just it works for everything.
But I heard that you recently got a new camera. Is that right?
Yes, actually, I really. I always tell my students you should really have a backup camera with you when you travel. And there I was, just carrying the one Fuji because that's the only one I wanted to use. So I almost got a second one as a backup camera. And instead I decided to get the X-T1 so that in case I want to use, different lenses, I have that option. And I started using it about a month ago, actually. I bought it just before I left for my workshop, just before they made the announcement of the new one that was coming out, but that's okay. And I really enjoy it. It's a great camera. Right now I'm just using the kit lens, but I'm not a zoom. I don't like zoom, so I definitely love primes better. So I'm looking at getting a couple primes for it.
So you're using that basically as a backup? You're still using your X100S when you're doing street or? For
street, for sure, yeah. I like, the new X-T1 will be, I don't know what it's going to be called, but will be completely quiet. The one I have is not as quiet as the X100S. So for me, street photography, I'm so used to the focal length. I know exactly where I need to stand to get the shot I envision that I love the 23 millimeter lens on that one. It's quiet. I'm so used to it that it's definitely my favorite tool for street. But I was teaching a workshop in Normandy, and that one was more a travel workshop. And so we did a lot of landscape, seascape, cityscapes, a little bit of street. It was a lot of different things. Then I used the X-T1 pretty much exclusively for that one, and I really enjoyed having a little bit more reach. So, and in situations where I don't care if it makes a little bit of noise, it was a great choice. They're both just amazing cameras, just perfect fit for me. I just love the dials. It's a photographer's camera. I feel it. I don't like the touch screens and going into menus. I like to be able to just turn a dial, and that makes a difference. That's why it fits me so well. I mean, there are great other cameras out there, and I don't think there is a bad camera out there. And I've had the opportunity to shoot with Sony recently, which has great cameras, but to me, it's not as intuitive as the Fuji and all the dials that are right there on the camera.
Yeah, I read that you were referring to the X-T1 graphite or silver model that has the electronic shutter that will let you be completely silent and shoot up to 1/32,000th of a second. And I hear that will be available on the X-T1, standard X-T1 as a firmware update in December, I think.
So great. Well, see,
I all set for being silent and stealthy even with your X-T1.
Oh, that's good news. I was wondering if they would be able to do that. I've been so completely out of touch for the past 2 weeks traveling and not having any time to do anything else but teach. So I'm glad. That's good news, so I don't have to upgrade.
You'll be able to get a firmware update. That's one of the nice things about Fuji, that they release new models, but they don't forget about customers that still have the old models, and they will release firmware updates regularly that will bring the old models up to speed with the new ones sometimes. So I'm hoping that my XE2 here will get that. Some kind of upgrade too.
Yeah, it's funny because everybody's telling me, "Are you going to upgrade right away?" I'm like, "No, I never jump on new stuff. I don't care. Like, I have the iPhone 5. I'm not looking at buying the iPhone 6 until mine dies." And same with the camera. I said, "No, it works fine. It's not going to change my life to have the latest model. And as long as my cameras work, that's all I need. So I'd rather spend my money on traveling."
Yeah, so it's not all about gear, as your friends Frederick Van Johnson and Doug Kay say. It's all about gear.
No, Doug and I we do have fun talking about gear, but for different reasons.
And so Your workshop participants ask you much about your choices of gear? Are they surprised that you're showing up with just a small camera that, like, under the desk? Oh, he's showing up with that camera. I was expecting a big DSLR.
We thought she was a real photographer. Actually, no, you'd be surprised. There are very few DSLRs on my workshop. 2 years ago, I would say, like the week in Paris, they would be mostly DSLR, and I was still using my DSLR at the time, and one mirrorless or smaller type camera. And now I would say in a workshop of 8 participants, there are 6 mirrorless users, mostly Fuji or Sony, or Olympus, and then 2 DSLR users. But even the DSLR users will have a mirrorless, and they end up mostly using that for the workshop once they see everybody else does it and how much more inconspicuous they are. And it's better to look like a tourist, than a pro shooter, for sure.
Yeah, I was recently on a photo walk in Ireland with some friends that we met online. We do this event year after year, and this year we were in Ireland, and I saw the changes. People that used to shoot DSLRs now show up. It was like three XT1s, my XE2, 3 or 4 Sony A7s, and so on. And I said, where are all the Canons, all the Nikons? There was barely one guy with a Nikon, 2 with a Canon, and yeah, I'm still set myself, like, unconsciously maybe a limit, because people were really now showing up with very small cameras. Like Gordon Lang was there with the Sony RX100 III, which is, I tried it, it's an awesome camera, but it's so small. I mean, I've got big hands, and I still find it hard to, I'm afraid I might lose it just because where is it? Where did I put it? Is it in my pocket? Is it there?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's amazing. And like, just an example, on my workshop, one of the women who was signed up on day 4 did a sprained her ankle. Not a bad sprain, but a little bit. And she was carrying her DSLR and her small camera in her bag. And I said, you know what? We're going to get that ankle taken care of, and then leave that DSLR. You don't need all that extra weight today. And she was so happy. She limited herself to her one camera. So even people that are really still afraid to go out without their DSLR, they just need a little bit of a push. But also, it's that perception. People think that they have a big camera, they're more serious, or they're, and I think too, even now that, there is no reason for wedding photographers not to go with the mirrorless systems, but I think it's the perception from the client point of view. They don't expect you to show up and do a wedding shoot with a small camera, because the guests have bigger cameras. And so once that people start getting educated and they pay more attention to the work versus the gear, I think that's going to change. And that's going to be, I think, the tipping point where people won't have that perception that bigger is better.
Yeah, I'm sure. So let's talk a bit about your work as an educator. So you are a frequent guest on This Week in Photo, as a show where you now have your own podcast series about street photography. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Sure. Yeah, it was great. I've been a guest host pretty much every month or every other month on TWIP for a few years now, and a few months ago, Frederick Van Johnson, who's the producer, asked me if I would have my own show, because TWIP is changing. It's a whole network with different, new podcasts being released. And so the natural next step was to pick street photography, and so we talked about it, and I said, sure, I can do this. If you hand it to me like this, if I don't have to do all the behind the scenes work, I can probably fit that in my schedule. And Street Focus was born, and now I think episode 3 is being released today, and it's all about street photography. It's a 20 to 30 minute podcast, short podcast, and it's on a 3-week rotation format. Week 1 is a conversation about street photography with a street photographer. week 2 is a Q&A/street challenge episode where I answer listener questions and I talk about a technique and invite listeners to submit some images for a contest. And week 3 is called Streets of the World, and that is an episode where every 3 weeks I will be talking with a photographer who is a street shooter in a specific location, LA, New York, Berlin, you name it. And we'll pretend like we're I'm a street photographer. I have a 48-hour layover in LA, which is going to be the episode released today, actually, with my friend Rinzi Ruiz as our guide. And so I'm a 48-hour, I get to the airport. What do I do next? I'm a street photographer. So they talk about their favorite spots to shoot, why. We talk about safety consideration, cultural considerations whenever that applies, and so forth. So, and then that new city every 3 weeks. So, and then their episode, then the rotation starts again, week 1, week 2, week 3. So I started this, and let's see how it goes. But so far, it's been pretty popular. So.
Yeah. So you do contests, you said?
Yeah, there is a contest on the Q&A episode. Street Challenge is a contest, and we just had one about silhouettes.
Do you have prizes?
There will be. My executive producer assures me that we will have some prizes, so I have to check with Frederick.
I'll check it out. Well,
it may not be a brand new camera, but we'll start small.
No, I'm subscribed to the podcast. I was listening yesterday. I don't listen to podcasts every day. Not possible for me to keep up. But when I'm driving, I connect the iPhone to the in-car entertainment system, USB, Bluetooth, whatever, and I listen to podcasts when I'm driving. I was listening yesterday to your interview with Thomas Leuchters. Very interesting.
Good. Yeah. Well, I'm still new at this, so hopefully, there'll be when I listen back to the first episodes, I'm probably going to be like, oh no, but it's fun. I really enjoy it. Just meeting all those people, preparing the shows and talking with so many photographers from all over the world has just been fantastic so far. Because I have a few episodes ready to launch, so I'm ahead about 10 weeks.
Yeah, I'm new at this too. This is only my 4th interview, so I'm a beginner like you say.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat together. So what was I meaning to ask? That's what doesn't happen to professionals. They don't forget the questions. No, just kidding. So still talking about your education. So what's workshops? Where are you going next?
Next week, I have a workshop here at home in Minneapolis, which is actually kind of nice. It's a weekend workshop, street photography. And their photographers come from all over the U.S. and Canada, but I don't have to stay in a hotel. I can sleep in my own bed. I just really like that. Once in a while, it's kind of a nice break, no airports. And then a few days after that, going to New York. And I teach street photography with James Mayer, who lives in New York. So we co-lead that one because I feel like when you shoot a city like New York, you need to do it with a New Yorker. And I think having both us as teachers, it's a big bonus for the students as well. And James knows his city like no one else. And then I'm off for 2 months just writing and podcasting. And then January, I just launched a weekend workshop in Paris because all my workshops in France have been week-long workshops, and a lot of Europeans want to come just for a weekend. So actually, registration, I launched it yesterday. Registration started coming in from the UK. So I think it fits more in what Europeans want. Shorter workshops versus the week-long, which are very popular among Americans, Canadians, Australians, and South Africans. But they come from so far, they have to stay for a week. But Europeans can, take the train and come to Paris for 3 days and hang out on the workshop. Mm-hmm. So it's street photography in January, and then I'm off to LA teaching a workshop with Ibaryan Exparello, and then Rome in April and Paris in May again. So yeah, something every month.
I'm curious because you were doing commercial photography, which means you had clients, and you did food, so you probably were shooting for catalogs, magazines, and so on. And you decided to switch over to street photography and do workshops. And how did people find you? I mean, you just put yourself out there and said, okay, I'm doing a week-long workshop in Paris teaching street photography. Who am I? I'm Valérie Jardin, renowned commercial photographer who has been shooting jewelry and food until yesterday. How does it work?
Well, no, I was, see, that was my job. My passion was always what I'm teaching now. I was a street photographer before I became a commercial photographer. I always worked on personal projects. I always blogged my personal work besides my commercial work. So those were completely different things for me. I never even mixed them. On social media, I would mostly show my personal projects, which usually had to do with, architectural details, abstracts in architecture, and mostly and more street photography. So people actually came to me and said, why don't you teach workshops in street photography? Why don't you teach a workshop in Paris? It's actually the people asking me that made me make the jump. I said, well, why not? Actually, that would be really cool if it sells. I was not a well-known commercial photographer. I mean, I worked mostly with local clients here. But and I started writing a lot about photography, but I never wrote about commercial photography. I wrote a lot about the business aspect of photography because I feel, well, people can probably learn from my mistakes. I've pretty much done it all, in how to get new clients and how to use social media and such. So I wrote for DPS, Digital Photography School, for quite a few years. Built an audience. Because workshops are really, really hard to sell. You don't sell them locally. You have to have an international audience. And so I had to build that audience, then launch. And my first workshop filled up, and actually I had a big waiting list. And it wasn't a year that workshops were not selling out. I was talking with a lot of my colleagues who run international workshops. I said, oh, you're starting on a really tough year for the international workshops because they're not selling. And mine sold, and then I now in 2 years I've taught 18 or 19 workshops, I think, and they've all sold out. So it's just positioning yourself and being available, being you. Really, it's all about being yourself, because people they buy your expertise, but they buy your personality as well. And so people, if they feel intimidated or something, they may not sign up, but if they feel like, oh, that'd be kind of fun, and we've listened to her on TWIP so many times. Now I have my own podcast. People read my articles. Then they meet me and they feel like they've known me for years. And so it kind of takes how do you say that, breaks the ice a little bit. And then, the workshop, we're like one big happy family for a week. So people learn from me, they learn from each other. It's just an amazing experience. It's so much fun. It's there's so many tears at the end of a workshop. Yeah, it's hard to say goodbye.
So it's all about marketing, building your reputation online.
Yeah, that's the key, and doing it right without being too pushy. I mean, you can't just sell. You have to give, and then, like when I post a new workshop, like I'll use Facebook, the promotion on Facebook, but you can only do that every so many weeks, or people will just get tired and unlike you. So you really have to gauge that and do it right, and not bug people all the time, and just show work that they will respond to, and answer their questions, which is a huge part of my daily workflow, is to answer fan mails. Isn't that funny to say? But I get fan mail. Fan mail, via email, answering, being there when people ask questions through the blog, through social media, and having that interaction. That's a big part of it. And it's a lot of work. That in itself is a lot of work.
Yeah, see, I remember hearing this said by Frederick Van Johnson. Mm-hmm. And another great guy who does a great show about marketing and photography was, I'm sure you know, Brian Caporici.
Yep.
Yeah, and they mention this over and over again. You need to give. You need to content marketing is all about giving information stuff to people for free, and you give 10 and then you sell one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what you do. Yeah, it's like you give 80%, you receive 20, but it's probably it's probably actually not even that. And just through writing. I mean, I write articles for DPS and other magazines. I mean, people read those for free. So I think then you create a relationship, and people want to learn more from you, and they want to meet you, and they want to see through your eyes. And I think that's why people come, from the workshop. And people have come from, Australia, South Africa, India, the U.S., of course. So people are coming from really far to spend, a week with me or a weekend. And I think I shoot with them. I don't just tell them, okay, here's what I want you to do, now go and do it. I'm out there shooting with them the entire time. So they get to see my techniques, they get to see through my eyes, and that's how they learn. Besides the critique session, that's a really important part of the workshop.
Another thing, another point in your educator's activity is your participation as a master in the Arcanum. Talk us up a bit about this. And by the way,
my year wasn't busy enough. I had to take on yet another.
In interest of disclosure, I will mention that I am one of your apprentices at the Arcanum, learning the ropes of street photography from you.
Yes, and that's been really fun. Yes, it was last winter when Trey Radcliffe and the team reached out to me and asked me if I would take on a cohort for street photography as a master. And as a master, we are talking about master and apprentice, not a master in photography. So I have a cohort of 23 apprentices today, and you're one of them. And it's been fun. I've been doing this since April. It's a lot of work, and we're all learning because this is a new adventure, but it's working. It's been really, really fun to see so many of my apprentices grow as they level up, and I've become so attached to them, and I get to meet some on workshops now, so it's really fun. I have 4 or 5 joining workshops in the next few months, and Jennifer was just on my Paris workshop last week, so that's kind of the icing on the cherry on the cake, or the icing on the cake, whatever. The bonus is to get to meet people from all over the world, and my cohort, I mean, it's from Korea, from Ireland, from Australia, Finland, Italy. So it's just fun to see images from the streets of all those places as well, and being able to share.
Yeah, sure. I've been loving it.
Good.
So I think we covered quite a bit of information today. We didn't talk much about gear, even though this show.
Because everybody knows I'm just not about the gear for me.
It's perfectly okay. I mean, I had this interview last time with Gordon Lang, and it was all about the gear, which is great. Gordon knows everything. I mean, he does it professionally. He's a reviewer. He goes to trade shows. He went to Photokina. He knows everything about all the latest models. He tests them all. So that was all about the gear, and this has been a bit about the gear, a bit about education, a bit about social media marketing, and a bit of everything. So I think it's been very interesting
thank you.
For everybody.
And I think, it's really, when it comes down to it, it's all about vision and passion, and I'm glad there are people like Gordon who can, test all that gear. I would hate every minute of it. I love what I have because it's familiar, and for me, it's an extension of me and my vision. It doesn't come in the way. If I had to test new gear every week, that would just take all the fun away. So for me, it's really never been about gear or brand. It's really been about getting the right tool for the right job, and whether I was shooting when I was shooting commercially or now shooting just for me. And I mean, we're so lucky. There's so much great gear out there. I mean, there's no better time to be a photographer, that's for sure.
Right. So where can people go to find more about you, about your activities?
Well, they could simply Google my name, because now I think everything pops right up. But my website has links to everything. I still need to add the new podcast. So it's ValérieJardinPhotography.com. That's all in one word, VALERIEJARDIN photography.com. And then check out my podcast, Street Focus, and that's over at TWIP, thisweekinphoto.com. And yeah, it's exciting. So it's a weekly podcast. So a little bit of everything about street photography, and I think it's pretty unique because I don't think there is too many other podcasts devoted just to street photography out there. So.
And I think people can find about VR Canon at vrcanon.com.
Correct. Yes.
So thanks for being our guest, and I hope we actually seen each other online for a few times already, but I hope one day, well, our paths will cross in some European or American city.
That would be great. Well, maybe you can make the drive to Rome next April and meet for dinner.
really bookmarked, put it in my calendar, the dates. So
that would be fun. There may be other fellow apprentices on that one, so that would be a really fun little reunion if you could join us for a dinner or something. So
that would be exciting.
Yeah.
So, thanks again.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.